Hi, it's Nicole Kali again. Hope you're having a good week. I just had a brew talk with Rebelmatic. They're a badass band from New York City, and they've been around since 2008. We were just discussing their backgrounds growing up in that city, incredibly multicultural, and gone through different phases. Their promo took place in Manila Lane, Little Africa, before Little Italy. I have The Ghost of Virginia, Volume 11, and I was reading some of it last week during Halloween. It's an anthology by L.B. Taylor Jr. It's a fun way to get to know y'all and to hear your own experience. I know that it's been difficult, to have periods of isolation, semi-isolation, and not always being able to get out as much as you want. It's a site known as the Devil's Stairs, and it got its name when the old Norfolk and Western Railway extended its rail line from Abington, Virginia into Ashe County, North Carolina, around 1914. It's a section of rock at a particular bend that was dynamited. There are a number of supernatural legends associated with these stairs. And his paperback book, strangely enough, written half a century ago, he doesn't pinpoint the location, but from his description, it likely occurred somewhere in the Great Dismal Swamp, which borders on the Virginia-North Carolina line. Known to be haunted and very, very formidable terrain. He tells of the time some boys decided to go hunting, and far from home they sought shelter in an abandoned shack. When darkness fell, they decided to sleep over, and at a late hour, however, they were awakened by one of the boys' dog, whining and scratching at the door. He heard a weird sound, like a combination of a whine, low moan, and loud wail. The boys then heard the dog racing around the shack, barking ferociously. It ran off into the dark woods. Several minutes later, the dog suddenly leapt through one of the open windows and landed on the floor. It was snow white in fear, and when the dog had left the shack, it was coal black. In the early 1900s, an old woman named Zippy Toll lived in Drummondtown, now Accomack on the eastern shore. She was known as a conjurer, a woman who could break spells and cast them. And the following is an account of one of her alleged prowess. There was a feud between Harriet and Emma Henderson. Harriet told Mrs. Williams' grandmother, Liza, not to give Emma any food, but Liza did, and upset. Harriet cut a coffin-shaped piece out of Liza's underwear and took the measure of her foot and put it in a graveyard. Liza fell sick in April, barking like a dog. Her husband James went to see root doctor Zippy, and she told him to find a cloth and she would do the balance. The cure worked. By September, Liza was picking apples in the orchard again. African ancestry. Many of us do know how to break spells, and we understand the intricate workings. Among the Hyatt findings were many strange beliefs. One of these involved ghost seers, people born at certain specific times or under peculiar circumstances, who had the power to see. Those born at or around the hour of midnight, Sunday children, and those born on Christmas, Good Friday, or Ash Wednesday. A dozen or so years ago, a 16-year-old girl worked at the renovated Tally Ho Theater at 19 West Market Street in downtown Leesburg. It had been built in 1923 and was named for the familiar fox hunting call and the sport that was so popular in the area. Today, the theater is owned by Judy Wilson and features first-run films and badass rock shows. When the girl was first employed there in the mid-1990s, others told her that Tally Ho was haunted by a former projectionist named Cliff. And they described him as a creepy, weird old man who loved his work and spent most of his time on duty or off at the theater. First sighting occurred at the Tally Ho Theater. A girl went upstairs to a storage room to take inventory one evening and literally bolted back down the stairs breathless. She had seen the figure of a man staring directly at her when no one was supposed to be there. We all ran up but saw no one. The writer of this narrative said she suspected Cliff bothered those in the theater, that he didn't like working there. The last reported sighting came one summer when all of the employees were gathered downstairs waiting for the theater to open. They heard a thunderous sound upstairs, like someone was moving a piano. At first they thought it might be the manager, but then they saw him downstairs. There was no one upstairs. And the same night as the movie let out, one of the customers said, "I didn't think you allowed anybody upstairs." When I was told that was the case, I said, "Well, then who's that man I saw on the balcony?" When the upstairs was searched, no one was found. It was then concluded that the only one that could have been seen was Cliff. A student at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, submitted the following account on the internet years ago. The university was founded in 1872 on a land obtained by a few wealthy local families. One of the parcels was obtained from three very strange sisters. They were Civil War widows that always dressed in black, and they died sometime around the turn of the 20th century, but their ghosts reportedly have been sighted at several campus locations throughout the years. The student said he had 4 friends that lived in an apartment on land that the sisters had donated. On one evening, one of the 4 students were out of town, and the others were in school or they were working. Kevin was the first to come home. He was exhausted and he went straight to bed, as many students do. And he was awakened by a sound, and he looked up to see a woman, an old lady dressed in black, pacing back and forth across the threshold of his door. When he turned on the light by his bed, she vanished. He went into the other room and slept on the fold-out couch. His roommate Hunter came home. He saw Kevin on the couch and figured he had just fallen asleep there, so went into the bedroom. A few minutes after he was asleep, he was awakened by someone breathing on his face. He opened his eyes and saw an old woman in black, the same that Kevin had seen. He jumped up, ran into the other room, and joined Kevin on the couch. Next to come home was Karen. When she saw Kevin and Hunter asleep together on the couch, she thought it a little strange, but didn't say anything. She went into the other room, and a few minutes later screamed. She told her roommates that she saw a little old lady floating above the bed. So she hopped onto the couch too. The next morning, Dave came home from visiting his parents and found them all huddled together. They told him of their encounters. He said he too experienced such a visitation, but hadn't told them because he thought that they wouldn't believe him. That just goes to show you have to share your experiences. I was talking to Winterwolf about that in general, beyond scary stories. You never know who is listening. You never know who is watching. That's sometimes eerie to think about, but your story truly could validate someone else's experience. And if it's the truth, then it is the truth. And this is Haunted Virginia, Legends, Myths, and True Tales. Chapter 24, Chessie. Chesapeake Bay and Appomattox River, Hopewell. Loch Ness and other famous lake monsters and sea serpents around the world, Virginia has its own water beastie. From online stories to pages of Weird Virginia and other books. This creature has made its mark. Chessie is named for the Chesapeake Bay. And for years, people have reported sightings of a serpent-like creature with flippers, not unlike Nessie of Loch Ness in Scotland. It even made the news in the late 1960s. And one witness on a boat said it came out of the water, raising its head. There are fins. Witches in Virginia, Chapter 31. Witchcraft and various historical, anthropological, religious, and mythological contexts includes the use of certain kinds of supernatural and magical power. A witch is a practitioner of magic, sorcery, witchcraft. Stereotypically women, but there have always been men and non-binary, altogether conjurers, right? It's beyond gender. It's simply the conduit to channel and the power of channeling. Witches are as much a part of Virginia history and folklore as anywhere else. There are homes in Virginia that have witch doors. Crosses carved on the panel doors to keep them away, and witch bottles to protect them from witches from Tidewater to southwestern Virginia. There's even a rumor of a witch that emits a green light when seen flying through the trees of the Old House Woods in Matthews, Virginia. In Stafford, there is a trail off Telegraph Road, which leads to a place called Witch's Pond. There's supposed to have been a sacrifice table in the 1700s, with letters in Latin. Numerous sightings of a woman have been seen near it. And I found that there is indeed a Witch's Creek behind where Ikea Harbor is today. Supposedly, this is why the area is haunted. Then, of course, Virginia has its infamous and famous witches. The Witch of Pongo, Grace Sherwood. There were many ways that Virginians used to ward off witches and what we call bad witchcraft. Celtic paganism and African-American / African-derived folk medicine and ritual magic. You leave a bowl of salt outside of your door. You hang a used horseshoe above your door. And you wear the color blue. Gullah, Low Country, and North Carolina have blue bottles. It's said to catch the evil spirits because blue is a sacred color. A counterspell against illness. To put urine in a bottle with iron nails, brass pens, and pieces of lead. This is Grace Sherwood's statue in Virginia Beach. And there are still some who live in the southwest portion of the state that believe in the lore of witches. One such place is Witch Mountain. It is a few miles northeast of Hillsville, the county seat of Carroll County, off Route 221 near Galax. It is said that a sect that believes in witches and maybe even practices witchcraft themselves inhabits the mountain. There are those that fear it and always take a path leading along the base by the safe light of the sun. And some travel at night, go miles out of their way to avoid it.